Chris Hodges, pastor of one of the biggest churches in the United States and in the world, abruptly stepped down just this past weekend. And he stepped down just days after telling his staff. So what does this mean for the larger evangelical church? Why did he step down so abruptly? And what can the church as a whole learn from this situation? That's what we're talking about on today's video, so let's get into it. Chris Hodges stepping down from Church of the Highlands. Like I said, one of the largest churches in the United States. Not just that, but this is the church that's behind ARC, the Association of Related Churches, which is probably the largest church planting organization in the United States. They're known for their approach to church planting, which is start big and stay big. Start with the lights, start with the band, start with all that, start with hundreds of people, and then you will never get small. You'll stay big. Now, we also know that ARC has been a part of a lot of scandals. There's been a lot of ARC churches involved in financial scandals, sexual scandals, immorality, all those sorts of things. So there's a lot that swirls around ARC, but ARC is actually a part of Church of the Highlands, okay? And also, this is the church that's behind Highlands College, which was one of the first big mega church colleges and kind of schools of ministry that is like a lot of the ones that we're seeing today. So what goes on at Highlands tends to ripple through the evangelical world because so many churches are learning from them. So Chris Hodges stepping down, it was unexpected. It's a little different than how we normally see these transitions, and it's something that I think we've got to pay attention to. All right, so let's go ahead and let's jump into this one. The Roy's Report put an article out about this yesterday. I saw news on Sunday about this and was waiting to get a little bit more information about it, but I want to go ahead and we will look together at a little bit of the article here and what is going on as far as Chris Hodges stepping down. So you see right there, you see the headline, founding pastor Chris Hodges abruptly steps down from Church of the Highlands. And I just want to look at a couple of things in the article that I think are important. And then we're going to look together at the video and we're going to break down some of that announcement and what it means for us. All right. So founding pastor Chris Hodges abruptly steps down from Church of the Highlands. Why is it abrupt? Because no one saw this coming. Okay. And we're going to see that here in a minute. You normally will hear about transitions at big mega churches, transitions from one pastor to another. Those are normally years in the making. There weren't even rumblings about this outside of Church of the Highlands, even inside of Church of the Highlands, as far as I know. Yet on Sunday, we get the surprise announcement that Chris Hodges is stepping down. So Chris Hodges, founder of Church of the Highlands in Birmingham, Alabama, one of the largest churches in the country, abruptly announced yesterday that he's stepping down as the lead pastor. Now he says, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not like fully retiring. And we're going to hear in the video here in just a minute, he's really stepping into more of a role at Highlands College. So it's hard to tell how involved is he still going to be as a founding pastor. That's what they're calling his new role. How involved is he going to be at Highlands? Is it going to be just a little bit? Or is he going to kind of be the puppet master who is running things from the shadows and behind the curtain? And I think only time is going to tell how he's going to do that. Now you see here at the bottom of that page, Chris Hodges is also one of the co-founders of the Association of Related Churches, which we talked about a moment ago. And the Church Planting Network, guys, it's not only one of the biggest in the world, but again, it's been tied to so many scandals in recent years. Now, something you may not know about Chris Hodges, and we're still waiting to see what comes out about all of this, but it is worth noting, Hodges is named or associated in 3 separate lawsuits right now. And those lawsuits are actually lawsuits that are brought by Stovall Weems, who was a part of ARC. He was the lead pastor of Celebration Church, which is a part of ARC. And they've got some crazy accusations, okay? Now, if they're true, these are really big accusations that include things like not just defamation, but racketeering. So that's something that's going on right now. I don't know if it has anything to do with Chris Hodges stepping down, but it is important that we know when someone steps down abruptly like this, are there other things going on that may be playing into it? So we have to at least note that. Now, who's taking over for Chris Hodges? That's going to be Mark Pettis. Pastor Mark Pettis, he was a student pastor for a really long time at Church of the Highlands. He ran Motion Conference, started Motion Conference, and in recent years, he's been the president of Highlands College. Okay, so he's going to be taking over, and he's got really a year runway to do this, where he is fully stepping into that role. Chris Hodges said right before his message that he's been talking with Mark Pettis about exchanging roles for a couple of years now. Now, it doesn't sound like he talked to the elders about it before then, or even his family, but they've been talking behind the scenes for a couple of years about that. But Sunday was the first time anybody really heard publicly at Church of the Highlands about it. So this has been going on for a lot longer than we'd probably think. Excuse me there. So there's a lot of questions around the transition. Julie Royce talks about, one of the things that Stovall Weems talked about, and Stovall Weems is not, someone who I super trust, okay, but he was interviewed for this article. But he said, hey, leadership transitions like this, it's super abnormal for them to happen this quick, okay? They normally are going to take years. People are going to know they're coming. You're trying to, especially a church as big as Church of the Highlands, you want people to get behind this new pastor, and that normally takes a lot of time. So that's probably the most surprising thing about this one is how quickly it happened. And at a church like Church of the Highlands, it's hard for things not to leak. So the fact that this didn't leak earlier tells me that these have mainly been conversations between either Chris Hodges and Mark Pettis, or this happened quicker than they're letting on, okay? Stovall Weems said the fact that Chris Hodges gets up there and says, I talked with my family over the holidays, which you're going to hear in just a minute in the video, and I announced it to the staff on Thursday. So this stuff happened really, really quick. Now it's Sunday, and he's trying to act like everything normal, Weems said. It doesn't happen like that. Why do we do it now? Why is it happening so abruptly? And I didn't notice this until I read the article. Like I said, I'd already seen this, waiting on more news to come out. But Stovall Weems, he's the one that first noted that Chris Hodges is already off the website as the pastor. He's not an elder. He's not an overseer. He's not a trustee. He's not doing any of that. Now you see right there, Chris Hodges with Robert Morris from Gateway, who was embroiled in scandal last year and had to be removed. So beyond the lawsuits that Chris Hodges is a part of, he's been connected to a lot of scandals, and we're going to talk about that as well before we get done, just so that you're aware. Doesn't mean that he knew about all these, doesn't mean that he covered up for them, but where there's smoke, a lot of times there's fire, and I think it's concerning how many of these big ministry scandals that he has been around. Robert Morris was not just around Chris Hodges. Robert Morris was actually one of the overseers of Church of the Highlands, and they removed him from that role right before he was removed from Gateway Church. Okay, so there's still a lot of questions there. What did Chris Hodges know? He said he didn't know anything. Did he know more? So all of that to say, there's been a lot swirling around Chris Hodges, from those lawsuits to what happened with Robert Morris to a lot of the other scandals. There's been a lot swirling around him. He hasn't said a lot, and then now all of the sudden he's stepping down. I hope it doesn't have anything to do with these things or any information that he thinks may be coming out, but we at least have to talk about that. And you see at the bottom of that page where Julie Royce said the Royce report specifically reached out to Church of the Highlands and to Chris Hodges. Neither one of them responded for comment. Okay, neither one of them responded for comment. So that's what we've got from the article. What I want to go ahead and do as well is I want to play for you this video, okay? And we've cut it up, we sped it up a little bit, we cut out a lot of the fluff just so that you can hear the most important parts. But I want you to hear this announcement because I think there's some important questions as well as some things that we can learn from this announcement. And there's more questions that arise, I think, as we watch this announcement. So let me go ahead and put that on the screen for you guys, and we'll take a look at this together.
I have some very exciting news to share with you about the future of our church. And before I share it, I want to be really, really clear. I want to just make sure you know this right on the front end, that I'm not going anywhere, everybody. I'm going to live here the rest of my life. Come on, everybody. Is that okay with everybody? I'm going nowhere. But today I am just delighted to announce a transition of roles that is going to take place here in our church.
All right, so right off the bat, he wants to make sure, and I think there's a reason for this, that everybody knows in Highlands, hey, I'm not leaving, I'm going to be here. And again, this is the reason why these kind of transitions are normally announced years in advance because people freak out. They know that senior pastor. These churches are built a lot of times on this celebrity of a big pastor. Chris Hodges is no exception. He's the founding pastor of Church of the Highlands. So if anybody thinks he's leaving or he's being forced out or anything like that, their attendance they're giving, all of that is going to take a big dip. He wants to be very intentional to let people know he's not going anywhere before he announces anything because no one's expecting an announcement here. So he just says, hey, I've got an announcement, but before you hear anything, I'm going to stay. That's the reason why he is doing that, so that it calms the panic and nobody's leaving, nobody's stopping giving or anything like that, because this is super abrupt.
Just for the past 2 years, Pastor Mark and I have talked with each other probably every week for more than 2 years now. And we pray together. We've actually received counsel from our elders. And then on the outside, we actually got people who've already been through the transition process and just said, teach us what you guys know. And we've went through that process. Recently, over the past 3 or 4 months, I've been meeting with our elders. If you're new to our church, we are governed in 3 areas. We have staff elders that more their responsibility is the vision and direction of the church. We have non-staff elders. That's kind of more the official board of the church, and non-staff, obviously, so that there's no conflict of interest. But these men actually lead our church financially with the buildings and all those types of things. And then finally, we have a group of what I call apostolic elders. We call them overseers. These are people that just can speak into my life and be that source of strength and support. And you guys know about that. But I met with all 3 of them, and they.
All right, so Chris Hodges says 2 things I think are really important. One, he says, me and Mark Pettis have been talking pretty much for 2 years now about a transition like this, about him taking on more of the role of the senior pastor of Church of the Highlands, me taking on more of the role at the college. But it sounds like it's just been them, and it sounds like he has just brought in kind of the elders and the apostolic elders into this process. Now, what he's telling us about the governance, it does raise some questions I think we've got to learn as the church. He's very clear about their governance, but did you notice what he never said? He never said who's accountable to who, okay? He never said who he's accountable to or who Mark Pettis, as this new senior pastor at Church of the Highlands, is going to be accountable to. You know, he talked about the staff elders, which really just means that's your staff day-to-day, your executive team who's running things. We know they report to the senior pastor. When you think about those non-staff elders, they always call them trustees on the website. He even talks about it there. They help with financial stuff. For the most part, they set the senior pastor's salary. They sign real estate deals. They sign checks. But a lot of their power is from the way they've described it. It's limited to finances. So then you have those apostolic overseers, which are all, none of them are at Church of the Highlands. They're from different parts of the country. I think they would give a little bit of accountability to Chris Hodges. But the question is, can either of those groups remove the senior pastor if there's immorality? And if so, which one? But he doesn't say anything about that. All we're going to hear is that it sounds like he's just started bringing these leadership groups in on this. So for all intents and purposes, it sounds like Chris Hodges has made this decision unilaterally with Mark Pettis, and then just kind of brought people in on the back end to try to get them on board. So that's something that's a little bit concerning to me. Also for you, when you're a part of a church, it's important that we always know not just what the governance structure is, but who's accountable to who, okay? Who is responsible for any sort of discipline or removal of the senior pastor? Who are they responsible to if they're not doing their job well? So there's layers of government here, but we don't know how they work together.
Support, and you guys know about that. But I met with all 3 of them, and they were unanimous in not only the who but the when. Not only who it would be, but when it would be. And finally, actually, I even met with my own personal family. I met with them over Christmas. Of course, we talk about everything all the time. And the family said, "Yeah, Dad, we really feel good about this as well." And so.
All right, so 2 important things there. One, you're going to hear in a little bit, he says that 3 of the 5 elders are there today. But there he said all 3 of them were unanimous, those apostolic elders, about who this should be. Okay, so what I'm guessing is that Chris Hodges is one of those 5 elders as well, and that 5th apostolic elder position that was held by Robert Morris from Gateway Church, my guess is from what he's saying, that hasn't been filled yet. But he's just started looping them in. And then here's the really kind of wild thing about this. He says, and think about the way he said it, I even talked to my family. Like, I even brought them in on it. I would think in a situation like this, my family would be the first people to know that I'm thinking about making a transition. Chris Hodges didn't talk to his family about this, he said, until Christmas. That's when they sat down over the holidays and really started having these discussions. So this has moved wildly fast. And even if Chris Hodges and Mark Pettis have been talking about this for 2 years, like he said, it doesn't sound like they brought anybody in on it, including their families, until now. Okay, so again, that's wild to me. That makes me wonder, did they really talk about it for 2 years? If so, why was it so hush-hush? Or is there something else going on? Is there something with the lawsuits? Is there something with some of the other scandals around him? Is there something we don't know about that has led to this? And again, just when something this big happens abruptly, it's going to leave people with a lot of questions, especially if that's not explained.
I'm just delighted to let you guys know something that we are all unanimous in. In fact, I met with the staff on Thursday, and they're 100% as well on board. That Pastor Mark.
All right, did you hear that? He met with the staff. This was on Sunday. Last Sunday, he's announcing this before the message. He met with the staff and told them about this announcement on Thursday. Why on Thursday? Because most churches like this, your staff's going to be off on Friday because they're working on the weekend. So literally the last day that staff worked before this weekend announcement, he told them. So this explains why it didn't leak, because nobody knew. His family didn't know until December. He brings on the elders and starts talking to them, and then the staff doesn't know until Thursday. Again, we just got to ask ourselves, why so abruptly, so fast, when every other transition that we've seen in churches this size has taken probably 2 to 5 years. So it feels like something else is going on here that maybe we don't know, but they don't talk about it. We don't really, we don't hear anything other than we've been talking about this for years, but we didn't bring anybody else in on it.
That Pastor Mark Pettis will become lead pastor, and I'm going to take on a new role in our church. Again, not going anywhere, but I'm going to take on the role as founding pastor. As founding pastor, y'all, I'm still going to be speaking here. Is that all right with everybody? I'm still preaching, okay? That's good to hear. I'm glad in fact, I'm beginning a brand new series next Sunday, and Pastor Mark has asked me to preach. I'm going to preach the Sunday before Palm Sunday, and Easter. It'll be my 25th Easter, and I can't wait to celebrate the risen King on Easter.
So why is he telling people that? Hey, I'm going to keep preaching. I'm preaching the week before Easter, the week after Easter. I'm starting next week's series. Again, anytime you announce a transition like this, people normally leave the church. People stop giving. So Chris Hodges is letting people know, 1, I'm not going anywhere. 2, I'm going to keep preaching. I'm even going to be preaching on Easter. He's saying everything that he needs to say so that there's the least chance of people leaving and stopping giving, because this is a huge ministry machine. So it sounds like he knows, hey, this is abrupt. It's going to be really hard for people to handle. So I've got to say all of the right things right up front.
But this new role as founding pastor is actually going to allow me to increase my efforts over at Highlands College as chancellor. Right now, it's been about 80% church, 20% school. And honestly, I have so many things that I want to do that require that to flip. And I'm still going to be working hard, y'all, all right? I'm not retiring. I don't plan on retiring anytime. As long as God gives me breath in my lungs, I'm going to serve Jesus, okay? No rocking chairs and golf in my future, okay? So I'm not retiring. I'm not burned out. I am not tired. In fact, I have more energy and passion. But this transition of roles is actually going to let me live out my ultimate calling. Let me tell you what that is. And that is, I've always felt led to empower other leaders. I see the church that way. That's why we started Highlands College. That's why the dream team, for heaven's sakes. From the very beginning, I've said, this church is not going to look like me. It's going to look like the vision and the ideas of the people in our church. That's why we have Grow. That's why we have ARC. We have constantly been empowering other leaders. That's who I am. But
so what he says there is hyper important, okay? There's so much stuff in just that couple of sentences, right? But he says, hey, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be working more with the college side of things, but not just that. I want to really step into my true calling, what I've always believed my true calling is, and that's developing leaders. He said, I see the church that way. Why do we have, and I'm just spitballing, this is from my vantage point. Why does ARC get attached? Why does Church of the Highlands get attached to so many problematic systems, to so many churches in scandal, to so many different things and questions like that? I believe it's this right here. I don't believe that Chris Hodges is a bad guy, okay? I believe what Chris Hodges just told me. His calling for a long time, he's felt like, is developing leaders. And he said, that's how I see the church. It's why we do ARC. It's why we do Grow Conference. It's why we do, and he just explained why do they have all these systems that we talked about many times at Church Disrupted are very problematic and tend to be in a lot of churches that have faced scandal, spiritual abuse. People have been traumatized through religious trauma. Why are so many of these things there? And I believe it's because these systems are built through the lens of leadership and business. So again, what he told us isn't bad, but I think it's important because it sounds like for a long time, he hasn't felt like his calling has been a pastor or a shepherd or a teacher or a visionary or any of those things. He's felt like his true calling was developing leaders. And when you're developing leaders, you're going to create business systems. So if he's felt like that's his calling, then no wonder he's ran Church of the Highlands and all the things connected to it more like a business than a church. Now, when people don't realize that, though, they're expecting a church, they're expecting to be pastored, they're expecting spiritual growth, they're expecting all of this. And yet what we get from a lot of these churches is we end up getting chewed up and spit out by the business systems and business side of the machine, because there's not necessarily, from, again, this is from my vantage point, there's not necessarily enough pastoral people on staff who have the authority to be able to step in with Chris Hodges and say, hey, this is getting too systematized. It's getting too business-like, and it may be hurting people. But again, I think that's hyper important that he just said, this is going to allow me to step into that calling. That's what I felt like my calling is for a long time. It's around leadership. It's around business.
I'm getting older, and I'm just finding I see the world through a different lens, no longer kind of as a father, but as a grandfather. In fact, that's the best analogy to let you guys know how I feel. If you've loved me as a father, you're going to love me as a grandfather around here. They call me PC for Pastor Chris. We keep calling me PC, but it's going to be Papa Chris now. Everybody all right? Okay. All this feels so right in my spirit, and I have the greatest confidence.
If you love me as a father, you're going to love me as a grandfather. Why do we have to make our pastors out to be fathers? Why do pastors have to make themselves out to be spiritual fathers of people all the time? Now, Church of the Highlands is a charismatic church. They don't always show that right off the bat, but they are a charismatic church. And especially in charismatic churches, that language of spiritual fathers and mothers, it's used a lot. But as you're going to see when we talk about Mike Bickle here in just a little bit, that idea of being a spiritual father, spiritual mothers, it is used commonly in abuse, and it's commonly used to manipulate people to keep them quiet, right? So I struggle with that language, especially because scripture says, Jesus said, don't call anybody father, but your father in heaven. And now he's saying, hey, you love me as a father, you're going to love me as a grandfather. Call me not Pastor Chris, but Papa Chris. That's a little cringy to me, but I understand it from charismatic circles. I do think we've got to start asking questions, though. Is that language helpful given how much it's showing up in all of these scandals and spiritually abusive environments?
Confidence and belief in Pastor Mark and Jill Pettis. They've been a part of our church for nearly the whole journey, 23 years. Pastor Mark and Jill are true spiritual sons, a son and daughter to me. And so today we're beginning this season of transition. Pastor Mark is going to be the lead pastor, and I've asked him to take a whole year. Well, I'm not going to put any pressure on him to have all new things right off the bat, but I asked him to take a year to develop vision in this year of new beginnings, everybody. He'll step away as president of Highlands College, our board. He'll continue to have a strong voice as a board member and pastor of the church, but our board of directors will begin a new search for our president. We'll give you more details about that, but in the meantime, our executive team and myself will be leading in that capacity. I've invited some of our overseers. In fact, we have 3 of our 5 overseers.
All right, so before we get into that with the overseers, I like the fact that Chris Hodges has given Mark Pettis a year kind of runway to do this. That I'm not putting pressure on you to change things right off the bat. And guys, I don't know Mark Pettis very well, but I've met Mark. I've been able to meet Mark a couple of times. We've been able to have some conversations. Everything I know about Mark Pettis is good. Okay, so I feel semi-comfortable about this, but I have to disclaim, I don't really know him very well at all, okay? But I have hope. I have really high hopes that this transition could be a good thing if Church of the Highlands gets behind it and if Mark Pettis will lead as who Mark Pettis is. If he's not worried about stepping on, Chris Hodges' toes, or, he's not worried about, really having to answer to Chris Hodges behind the veil, because again, that's one of the questions is Chris Hodges really going to turn this all over to him, or is he going to be making a lot of the decisions behind the scenes? That's yet to be seen. But if Mark Pettis takes a more pastoral role, he can actually balance out all the good that's come from Church of the Highlands, from ARC, from all of that, and balance more of a, hey, we've got these church growth systems. What if we now started focusing on protection systems, accountability systems, and making sure that we are helping not only our church, but we're setting the example for other ARC churches that follow us on what it looks like to be transparent, to be accountable, to protect people. Because the bigger these churches get, and think about the ARC model, start big, stay big. If he would begin to look at and say, the bigger these churches get, the greater chance we're going to hurt people, that abuse is going to be hidden if we don't put protective systems in place. So that's my hope. That's my hope, is that Mark Pettis goes that direction. My greatest fear there is that he's not going to feel like he can. It's going to be a lot more of the same. But that's my hope. That's my prayer. I am praying for Mark Pettis. I would encourage you to do the same. Whether you were a part of Church of the Highlands or not, pray for Mark Pettis. Pray God gives him wisdom. Pray that he would have the courage to lead the way that God calls him to lead, and that he would see the impact that Church of the Highlands could have on ending scandal and spiritual abuse and helping churches learn how to respond to them really well when that happens, okay? I think this is a much more natural fit for Chris Hodges. I think Chris Hodges leading Highlands College is a much more natural fit for him. Now, my hope for him is that he steps out of, other than preaching a little bit, he steps out of Church of the Highlands and lets Mark Pettis lead it. He steps out of a lot of ARC, and instead of having his hand in all of that, that he focuses on Highlands College, because I think he would do really good on the education side. Now, here's the other thing. I think this has to be said. I would hope more than anything that Church of the Highlands, Highlands College, and ARC would separate into 3 distinct organizations. Because as far as I understand it right now, it looks like ARC and Highlands College are associations and conventions of Church of the Highlands. So they're all sharing, different bank access and everything else. Now, if Highlands separates, they also need to stop being classified as a church. And usually the only way that an education institution can be classified as a church, or an organization like ARC can be classified as a church, is if they're associations and conventions of an existing church. So basically, this isn't quite how it works, because you can't really own a nonprofit, but for all intents and purposes, Church of the Highlands owns and operates. They're responsible for Highlands College and ARC, okay? What I would hope is that they would separate those, that Highlands would be a nonprofit educational institution, the ARC would be a nonprofit over here, because if you go to GuideStar and you look them up, you're going to see that both of them say ARC and Highlands College. They don't have to fill out 990s because they're technically a church, which just means, hey, because they're operating under the Church of the Highlands umbrella, they don't have to be as transparent as other nonprofits. So I think that would help. Also, it's just really good for a church this big maybe to partner with institutions like that, but not be making all the calls in those institutions. So again, there's an opportunity, I think, for Highlands to get better under Mark Pettis's leadership, okay? Maybe focus a little bit more on health than just growth. I think this has the potential to be good for Chris Hodges if there's nothing else going on. Again, the abruptness of this does concern me, but I think this could overall be a good thing for everybody if they kind of diversify those things. ARC, Highlands, Church of the Highlands, Highlands College become separate organizations, and they'll stay in their lanes. But Chris Hodges says we got 3 of our elders here. They're going to invite the elders on stage, as well as Mark Pettis, and then let's hear from Mark before we move on.
In attendance today, Pastor Larry Stockstill, my pastor, Pastor Tom Mullins, and Pastor Jim LaFoon. And I'm going to ask them and Tammy and to come up on stage along with Pastor Mark and Jill Pettis. Would you please stand and honor our overseers? And would you give a hand clap for Pastor Mark and Jill Pettis and Miss Tammy? I am so proud of y'all in every way. I have this.
Now, Larry Stockstill, just so you know, we talked about those apostolic elders not being close to Church of the Highlands, that they're really absentee landlords. Larry Stockstill is in Louisiana, I believe, still. And Tom Mullins he comes from Christ's Fellowship in Florida. I'm not sure about the other overseer, but that is important to note. Again, these are supposed to be their apostolic overseers, but they're not in the same city. They're not in the same state. So they actually have to fly in anytime they're trying to hold them accountable, or just, do it virtually.
In every way, I have the greatest belief in you, and I just know great things are ahead. I've already heard what God has in your heart, and I'm excited about it. This church does need to be led by a younger generation, and I believe you're the man with all my heart. In fact, I don't even believe it. I know you're the man.
We are the poster child for higher heights. Just knew there had to be more, and we found that here at Highlands, that there was more in our walk with God. And since that moment, our answer has been yes. Yes to being a part of the dream team. Yes to being on the team as youth pastors. Yes to Motion Conference. Yes to Highlands College. And in this new season, the answer is yes. And the passion for that yes comes from this. We just live to see what God did in our life happen in other people. And I know there's a bunch of people in this room in every location. Come on, that's our mission, to take what God has done in us to the world that needs it desperately. And that's what, if you want to know, PC already said that these next 25 years are gonna be about more people knowing God, finding freedom, discovering purpose, and making a difference. I'm gonna say it one more time, knowing God, finding freedom, discovering purpose, and making a difference. That's who we are, that's our DNA, and just such an honor. And all that again comes from what God has done in us, and it's the honor of our life to serve this entire house, and that's what the rest of our life is gonna look like. We love you with all of our heart. Come on, the best is yet to come. Let's give God a shout today.
All right, so there's a lot of good there from Mark Pettis, okay? A lot of good that I'm hearing. My biggest concerns is, again, he's talking about this is our DNA. Mark, I want to challenge you. If you listen to this, or anybody around you listens to this, don't just advance the DNA that you already know from Church of the Highlands. Ask God what he's calling you to do, because different leadership is likely needed in this season, okay? A lot of times when a founding pastor leaves, you need different leadership to balance out where their deficiencies were over the years. Also, he talks about, outside of the DNA, hey, he repeated the mission statement multiple times: know God, find freedom, discover purpose, make a difference. If that sounds familiar to you and you're not a part of Church of the Highlands, it's because that's not just Highlands DNA, but again, it's that business kind of model, that business mindset, that leadership mindset that Chris Hodges talked about. ARC has exported that to a ton of other churches, and now you got hundreds of churches, if not thousands, all over the country that are just copying and pasting not only the model, but the vision and values. So join me. I hope you will, praying for Mark Pettis, that he really just gets wisdom and he listens to the Lord's. None of us know. It would just be speculation. Why was this so abrupt? Again, I hope it has nothing to do with the lawsuits. I hope that it has nothing to do with the scandals that are swirling around. And my hope and my prayer is that this is overall a good thing, not just for Church of the Highlands, but for the evangelical church as a whole. Because the things that Church of the Highlands does and the things that Life Church does, those two churches are really setting the tone for churches all over the evangelical world.